Okay, I think we're ready to roll with our online group and our in-room group. So I'll go ahead and call to order our league board meeting for Monday, March 23rd. Before we launch into some of our agenda items, I wanted to give Mayor Wright an opportunity to just give us an update on kind of tragedies in Wayne County that we could acknowledge him and acknowledge those struggles. So, Mayor Wright, if you're
Yep. Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Good. First and foremost, thank everyone there for all your thoughts and prayers. It was really appreciated. Um, we had the celebration of life, and the last funeral for Mrs. Allred was Friday. So that part of it we're moving forward, and now it's waiting for the legal system to do its thing. And apparently that'll be sometime in May before we'll know about extradition and those sorts of things.
I know that just such a senseless tragedy and so odd that this person would pick your communities for these senseless acts of violence. I'm deeply sorry that you're having to experience this as a community. Um, the only silver lining to things like this, I think, is sometimes we get together and support each other. So um,
Yep. Thank you.
thank you for taking a minute to share with us, and hopefully, if there's anything that you need that your extended city family can provide, you know that you've got lots of resources to tap into.
Thanks. I really appreciate that.
Uh, the minutes that were attached in our packet were not the right minutes, so we're actually going to skip that part of our agenda in terms of approving the minutes. Just a reminder, there is a conflict of interest form. Seth is trying to dive from choking on a sandwich next to me, but I think we will survive.
It really took up.
Really choke up a lot. So we'll skip the minutes for the time being and double up on the next meeting. If anyone has a conflict of interest to declare or needs to update their form, please note that's in your packet and do so. And before we launch into our agenda item number 3, which is our boards and commissions report, I don't know about the rest of you, but I have been going through some withdrawals since the session ended, namely from Slido. So I actually emailed Carson late last night and asked if he would make us a couple Slido questions so that we can make sure that none of us get the Slido shakes by the end of the meeting. So prepared two questions for all of us to consider in the spirit of the fact that I love would you rather's. And so this one is a question about this bill has come up in past sessions. It did not come up this session, but it has been a current frustration of mine based on the fact that we just did this exercise where I'm again back to walking the dog in the dark and having to change the timing on all of our exterior lights. So I would like to know, would you rather Utah move to permanent standard time or permanent daylight savings time, or my plan, which is we move it 30 minutes. What's the difference? But again,
Negotiator.
I just think we can have it both ways. 30 minutes, our own time, Utah time. We already have the joke about Utah standard time. Why not? Why not go with this?
We just skip it and just everybody pick their own time. You just show up and work late, you say, all right, come on, daylight saving.
If you had emailed Carson, we could have had American Shepherd option on the third one. Okay, well, I'm glad to see that so many of you agree with me in this would you rather. Oh, I said that, now it's wrong.
You said that.
Okay, we also prepared a second question. So we'll move to this one. So I have a fascination with the list of Utah things, like the state tree and the state insect and the state dinosaur. And I have not gone through a session where there has not been a state thing that is proposed. This
How
session
many
is
sessions is that now?
22, Cameron.
Alexa, how old are you?
They're lining up here. First, yeah. So we have not in 22 sessions, not had a bill to do the state thing. It doesn't always pass. This year, there was a bill to make the Android operating system the part of the state symbols. This bill didn't advance because it's just so wrong. Next bubble was way to go. But we don't actually have a state food. We do have a state cooking pot. It's the Dutch oven, in case you were wondering. But we don't have a state food. So then I was curious, if we were to introduce our own bill next session for state food, what would it be? And it looks like y'all think it's funeral potato. Okay.
Say, just rice sauce. We should have a steak condiment. Let me get on that.
That's the problem.
Rice sauce all the way.
Okay.
It's our thing.
Does everyone feel better that you've engaged in this Slido?
Yes.
Okay. So now that we've engaged in our state Slido or our league Slido event, I'm going to turn a little bit of time over to Cameron learning about why he's on family leave and only appearing with us for a short amount of time.
Yes, I am here today. First of all, thank you everybody for your time today. And the purpose of today's board meeting is to set the stage for the interim. As terrible as that is to say, 2 weeks after the legislative session ended, Justin and I have already received calls from legislators, legislative staff, governor's office, and others, starting the process for bill files for next year and big ticket items. In fact, the session ended Friday. The following Monday, I didn't get any calls, but the Tuesday I did. The legislator wanted to start talking about the 2027 session, and as we indicated at the LPC briefing, our post-session briefing, the Thursday after the session, we already have 20 plus items that are on the agenda, but we haven't even started our own outreach to our members for potential bills or topics. So today's meeting really is setting the stage for the interim. Now, that's not what President Bradshaw asked me about.
No, I was going to remind you that was not what I asked.
You'll also see that in the board agenda, we've referenced the board objectives as a framing device for the different topics we'll be hitting today, and a big deep dive for those of you who are new. We'll be doing that in April. I'll talk more about that later. What she wants me to mention is that Wednesday after the session, my wife gave birth to a baby boy who's healthy. His name is Brendan Joseph, and he hasn't figured out when is day and when is night, or how to sleep for longer than 90 minutes at a time. So I will do my best, President Bradshaw, to not fall asleep during board meeting. But my wife is recovering, and we had some health issues during the pregnancy, but she's recovering with each day. And then I've been on family leave with board members who, actually most of you weren't on the board when the board had this discussion several years ago, but the league did institute a family leave policy several years ago, and he's benefiting from that now. So thank you very much. Because that family leave is facilitated my wife being impressed, me being able to spend time with Brendan, who's now a week and a half old, and then also with my daughters who are 8 and 5, who are adjusting to being big sisters and loving every minute of being big sisters. So it's my wife and I have commented multiple times just how different the last week and a half has been compared to our first two. our oldest daughter, she was born during the session, but she was born on a Tuesday, and that was back to the Capitol on Thursday, just because of, session being session, we didn't have any family policies at the time. And then our second daughter was born during COVID, and the week when George Floyd was killed, and so you had the protests and everything else, and so in fact, your former police chief and I were on the phone together a few days after my second daughter was born, discussing whether or not there should be a statewide curfew. So to go from the experiences of having a newborn during those two eras versus the last week and a half, just been night and day. So thank you for approving a family leave policy so that my family can benefit from it. And thank you to my staff who did a great job in DC last week while I was out, and I'll be out again off and on for the next few weeks. Staying on top of things I need to stay on top of, but also helping my wife and thank you. So, thank you. I can show you one on my phone. I don't have one for the public meeting, but
Okay. I did, just for the board, I did try and do a sidle poll. I was gonna suggest names, and they might want to reconsider.
you did suggest names.
I did suggest a name.
What of you?
I thought,
Lord of the Rings thing, or?
I just thought Kate was a good name.
As much as she thought Kate was a good name, there were others who thought other names were good too.
Like Zach.
We did suggest a few.
We just-
Yeah, Cam, actually, Cam, you should give the stats of how big you were being born and everything.
I was born in Daytown, 5 ounces, born a week and a half early. Technically 19, just, but who knows, I'm all over the place. My wife's recovering and doing well.
Awesome.
That's great.
Yeah, thank
This
you.
is important. We need to know this. How soon after he was born did you put him in a University of Utah onesie?
So I have a couple University of Utah onesies, but he actually hasn't worn any of them yet because this is the public meetings. The words carefully about my current feelings for the university.
Bob made the dance.
Hey, BYU will take you anytime.
Yeah, there are reasons.
He's out in one.
But yeah, that's onesies. But he has watched a lot of tournament. Well, he slept through it, but he's been in my arms for some basketball games.
Well, I'm sure I speak for the entire board when we say it's your work ethic and the amount of hours you put in year round, especially during the session, is really just tremendous. The time that you're spending now is really important, and so we expect you, after this meeting adjourns, to ignore our text and emails. You have a very capable staff. Spend the time. There's really nothing more important. Thank you. Okay, with that,
Thank you.
we'll go back to our agenda. If there's any other, no. Okay, we will then move to our board and commission reports and appointments. Alexa, you want to dive into that?
Funeral potatoes and baby Brennan are hard to follow. We just have one item that we need to take action on today, and then I have a few updates on boards and commissions that came out of the legislative session. So first, you, as the ULCT Board of Directors, are responsible for nominating an elected or appointed municipal official to the governor for him to choose from when making appointments to the Private Activity Bond Review Board. The PAB Review Board is responsible for allocating the state's private activity bond volume cap, which includes lower interest primary loans for a variety of uses, namely affordable housing development. Currently, South Jordan City Treasurer Chip Dawson is a municipal representative on the PAB Review Board. His term will end on May 1st. So we recommend that you nominate your very own Clearfield Mayor, Mark Shepard, to serve a 4-year term on the board. Mayor Shepard's professional experience in the real estate industry and housing finance, along with his almost 2 decades service as an elected official, makes him sorry.
How many years is that? Oh, that's next to me.
Yeah, how many fixes is that? That's pretty good start.
0.95 elected.
Election year. One election year.
So recommend you nominate Mayor Shepherd to the PAG Review Board. Mayor Shepherd, I don't know if you have anything to add, but that's the only item we need action.
No, I think you summarized it pretty well. Every is all.
Time, that's amazing. All right, and so do we want to take action on that right now, or should I go through my updates first before?
Anyone have any deep grilling questions they'd like to ask Mark? If not,
Sorry about this.
if you want to establish any other things that you feel like are critical to his ability to represent us on this board.
Not now.
No? Okay. In that case, let's entertain a motion on this and then we can move to the other update.
I move to have the illustrious, venerable.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Hi.
We'll give just a minute for those online. Any opposed? Seeing none? It looks like you'll be able to deploy the wisdom of all of your elected years. We look forward to it.
9 Alexa years.
Awesome. All right, and then I just have a few updates on boards and commissions that came out of this most recent legislative session. So HB 475, that's from 2026, not 2025, it's a typo. Created the Economic Development Council within the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Yes, it was renamed back to GoEd from GoYo, also in this bill. So this board is responsible for coordinating economic development projects with regional or statewide significance. And one of the 10 members on the board is to be appointed by you all, the Utility Cities and Towns Board of Directors. So likely next month or in May, we will come back in for an appointment to this board. And then HB 507 created a tax increment financing work group within the political subdivisions intern committee. The work group is required to be created by May 30th and is required to study tax increment financing and make a recommendation regarding the maximum percentage of tax increment or maximum total amount of revenue to be generated and utilized through tax increment financing. So taking a more holistic look at all of the different policies related to TIF that were passed this session. So this work group will consist of 7 members. It's required to come up with a recommendation by November 1st, and one of those members is to be appointed by this body. So again, he'll come back with those requests for appointments next month. And then I'll pass it along to Cameron and Molly to talk about the Pioneer Pipeline Work Group and the mitigation.
Before you leave those two, so the first one involving GoEd is a longer term assignment. The second one is a short, condensed by November assignment.
Correct.
Okay. And are you looking for someone that's more in a staff practitioner role for the second assignment, or for this one where either from a staff or an elected perspective?
I think either or. I think either or at this point. That second one is a little less formal.
Yeah.
So we want to have a few more conversations with legislative research staff who will be staffing that group to figure out what the right person is and what the right skill set is for that meeting. Whereas that other one, that other one is a very important political body. It's not the UEOC from several years ago, but it's in that spirit. So that's a different task.
Okay. So if people are interested, if you'll get any of those indications of interest or suggestions, yeah, prepared to talk about it when we're all down in St. George in April.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, and then Molly and Cameron, are you going to talk about this next too?
Yep, I'll do the first one. I'll do the second. The Pioneer Pipeline Work Group only affects a handful of cities who, as of now, they know who they are. But this was quickly situational awareness for the board. So part of the discussions around the gas tax with the petroleum industry and other stakeholders, there was an expectation that also made its way is legislative intent to expand the pipeline capacity coming into the state of Utah, to bring more crude to the state, Feeder 5. So when I say the cities know who they are, the Pioneer Pipeline currently runs through unincorporated Summit County, unincorporated Salt Lake County, Immigration Canyon, Salt Lake City, Woods Cross, North Salt Lake, and West Dallas. So if there is pipeline expansion following the Pioneer route, Pioneer Pipeline route, it would come through those jurisdictions. That doesn't necessarily mean it will come through those jurisdictions. It's possible that as they start to work on where this new pipeline will come, there could be other alignments they could look at that could then in turn bring in other communities. The reason we wanted to bring up for situational awareness here is that there were some pretty spirited discussions the last couple of weeks in session, whether or not there should have been some statutory direction that really amounted to preemption of land use and regulatory authority at the local level and try to facilitate this. And we pushed back on that and actually had a great meeting with all 7 of those jurisdictions. And ultimately, the legislators involved said, you're right, partnership's a better approach here than preemption. And so they've made it clear that they want to see collaboration between all of the governmental entities to figure out the pipeline. And I expect meetings will start like this spring. But situational awareness for everybody there. Right now, it only affects 7 jurisdictions, but it could affect others depending on what that alignment might look like.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. So for the mitigation task force, we've chatted for a while about the have some updates on how the mitigation fund works to become more self-this city. Originally in HB 596, there were some provisions that created a task force to work on these issues. However, HB 596 did not pass, and the provisions of that bill that were moved into other bills that did pass did not include this mitigation task force. The nice thing is that we don't need statute to create a task force. And so the plan is Tyler Clancy, the new state homeless coordinator, will be joining us later today. But our goal is to have a group of shelter cities, non-shelter cities, and Tyler Clancy, as well as support from lead staff to kind of have that conversation about what mitigation funding should look like, contributions, distributions, reporting how dollars are spent, things of that nature. So still pretty nascent in figuring out what exactly that will look like, but the staff in partnership likely with OHS will bring a proposal to the board, and from there we'll solicit folks to serve on that group.
Both elected staff members on that.
We haven't made a determination yet. I think it's potentially similar to this other group. I think we want to make sure that in some cities, the elected officials really know their numbers in and out, especially for the shelter cities. And in some, it's more staff driven. And so I think the, potentially quote unquote best fit per city may vary between elected and staff just based on how those cities are set up.
And Tyler will be here later this afternoon as part of the board meeting. So the question you could bring up there, looking forward to that. So thank you, Molly. And I think that was it, right, Alexa? Yeah. Okay. Back to you.
I picked an inopportune time to sneak in a bite of my sandwich. And then the next item, which is our engagement report, also by Molly. So as far as engagement goes, here's a reminder on what our current board objectives are on engagement. We don't need to spend a lot of time chatting about this today, but we're going to on our April meeting. But it is to engage with league membership, strengthen the connection to the organization, establish their ongoing challenges, provide league resources and events that meet the varied needs of membership, and pursue and facilitate technical assistance to support municipalities. So other updates for you as they kind of fit within those objectives. I think one of our really big wins from session is that we were able to fully restore the funding for the LAA program ongoing. It was a really tight budget year, even though the governor did include LAA funding in his budget, it was only one time. And having those dollars ongoing is huge.
to help us have some more stability in this program. So that we don't have to spend political capital year after year going to try to get those dollars time and time again. So a huge thank you to everyone who helped advocate for that. It was a massive effort from the community that do participate in the program and those that don't. So a big thank you to all of you, and I think a big shout out to McKenna and our contractors who have stuck with us throughout this uncertainty of trying to restore those dollars. And I think we're really excited to see what the future holds for this program.
Well, I'll just add two quick things. I want to thank the league officers. The league officers met with both President Adams and Speaker Schultz before the session and during the session to make sure they knew the priority of the LA funding and what that meant for our smallest members. And both the Senate President and the Speaker expressed their support and appreciation for the good work that's been done there. We were able to address some political issues that arose last year that resulted in that funding cut, and we got those addressed too. It was a win-win all the way around there. The second business that we'll talk about later in the meeting is that last year we put the big picture strategic discussion around LA on pause because we weren't sure what the funding was going to look like. Now we know the funding's there, so that will be part of our discussion in April.
Then moving on to the next item, the NLC Congressional City Summit was wrapped up in Washington, D.C. We were able to present about 70 representatives from cities and towns across Utah, which was really great. We had our brunch. Senator Curtis was great and organized another Capitol tour for the group, which Representatives Kennedy and Malloy joined. It was, I would say, a great conference overall. It's always nice after session to kind of have some time to connect with folks and learn about some things happening at the federal level. I think one thing that happened this year that was particularly exciting was Mayor Khan of Saratoga Springs was able to testify before the House Natural Resources about a bill that Congressman Burgess Owens is running to transfer some federal land over to the post office so that they can get their stuff. So that was really cool that he had the opportunity to do that. He was joined in the committee by Lehigh and Green Mountain. So that was really great. And otherwise, I know Mayor Shepherd is deeply involved with penalty and I don't know if there's anything else either of you would like to add.
I appreciated experiencing a tornado warning.
Yes, in DC, which is a real hard thing.
Being a native Utahn, I'm unprepared for that kind of a disaster. Big flash floods, wildfires, and earthquakes. So that was great. It was
And windstorms.
and windstorms. It's just not in the storm pattern. Only downslope. Yeah, it was a great time. I think one of the most impactful sessions I attended included the police chief for Minneapolis. That was a really impactful breakout session on immigration and local authority, and found his remarks to be really deeply impactful. Enjoyed spending time with our delegation as well. I don't know if you had any takeaways from your leadership position on NLC.
Yeah, I could see a whole lot of our delegation there.
I saw you in passing. Yeah.
Only disappointing not to be able to participate like I'd like to, but a lot of good stuff. Yeah, I think as far as impact, Rand Paul's speech during the general session was fantastic. NLC scheduled eight Republicans and 7 Democrats to speak at the convention, and had, I mean, that good of a response from Congress that they were able to bring in a bipartisan group to speak to everybody, and only got little hesitation on one of them. So that it was good. We were they did reach out to White House and were turned down from both president and vice president to come speak. So we did we make do with a whole bunch of representatives or congressmen, senators, and it was good. It was a lot of good came out of it. A lot of really good conversations on immigration. That I held a 4.5-hour meeting with 14 mayors and myself with on immigration and the impacts of immigration, and very great, really good meeting with a lot that came out of that.
Perfect. Thank you both. Yeah, it was a great time. And we all made it through the DC tornado of 2026. In addition to that, our next big event, we have mid-year coming up, April 22nd through 24th in St. George. As Cam mentioned, and we'll chat more, we'll have a board meeting there with more of our strategic discussion, as well as our typical programming. We're really excited to have Greg Jackson as our keynote. He has a great podcast, History Doesn't Suck, but he's a pretty engaging historian. He's actually based at WVU. And so it's pretty fun. He's getting a lot of kind of national acclaim and getting on the national circuit, but he's one of our local guys. So it was welcome to have him join us. Katie, anything on please register if you haven't already. We'd love to have you all there. We'll be doing a half-day training with Danya on conflict again, just before. Actually, it kind of, so would love to attend, we'd love to have them. But hopefully you can all find another time to either practice your conflict competence or further training your conflict competence. And then in addition to that, Cassie and I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our property tax outreach plan. So as you all know, property tax was one of the big issues of the session. And we, in conversations with a lot of folks and kind of hearing some of the angst amongst legislators and the public, kind of came to the conclusion that there's so much confusion about what property tax is and isn't and how it works. That really anything that the legislature does is unlikely to alleviate public frustration as long as the public does not understand how property tax works. And no one in that space communicating that, I think, clearly for the general public. And so we have entered into a contract with X Factor to come into that space more. I'll hand it over to Kathy to mention in a moment. We're also working with the tax commission on our trainings to make sure that we have that updated checklist for all of our municipalities on how to go through truth and taxation. And then we're also going through the final round of edits on the Making Sense of Dollars overhaul book that we are publishing in support of with support from the Gardner Policy Institute. And that will include a good chunk of time on property tax as well. So Cassidy, with that, can I hand it over to you to chat about the X Factor contract?
Yes. So we're working with X Factor to complete 10 1-minute to 1.5 minute videos. These videos are going to be animated and on a variety of topics. Carson can pull up that side if you have it handy to kind of show you the breadth of topics we're going to talk about. One thing I want to emphasize, this is not to replace anyone's efforts in communicating with their residents on what's happening should you choose to do a property tax increase. This is to support it, right? So there's some things like you as a city or town can't control. That's the process, right? Like you can't control the process, but you can talk about what you're doing and what services you're choosing to highlight and emphasize. So as you look at this list, we have like, what is property tax? Who pays it? Why do I keep paying property taxes after I own my home? Who collects property taxes? We're going to talk about assessed value. We're going to talk about how to read your property tax bill. We're also going to do a video about how you can get involved in the budgeting process. I think a lot of times you have residents who get their property tax bill and that's the first time they've heard of what's happening. Not all residents, but a few. So just kind of talking about like how you can get involved in public hearings, and similarly, like sometimes it's really just an email to your council member, right? Because as you know, you have your public hearings, but it's not really a forum for you to have a discussion with your residents, right? So that's kind of a few items we're working on. Yeah, any questions?
I love this. I can't wait to share it. This is gonna be really good.
Yeah, so we will be posting it on our website. So feel free to take the videos, right? We're not gonna have this really weird distribution process. We'll probably outline kind of like some ideas and a plan for you, because obviously some of you have really sophisticated and lovely comms teams, and others of you, you are the comms team. So we're gonna create a little bit of a guide on how to use these videos and how to help you and kind of things along those lines. Are there any suggestions to topics we may be missing on this list, or any other grand words of wisdom for us to keep in mind?
The things that I often find residents just kind of can't get their minds around is that their property, their home appreciates in value.
Mm-hmm.
But the cities aren't naturally capturing that. And I understand that's probably your assessed value. That could be like its own series of 10 1-minute videos. That is the hang up. And residents often assume incorrectly that we're getting kind of this inflation built in. And so that one is a key one. And the other thing is new growth confuses them. If you're in a city that has a lot of development taking, that is a bigger factor than if you're in a Goldilocks city.
Goldilocks, that's still a footstool.
That's what I'm going now. How that plays out. So those are the two areas that I find I spend the most time trying to explain when someone's upset.
One observation is unlawful for this law.
How many Alexas, Roger?
Like at least 3 elections.
Just finished my 48th session.
Oh, a little more than 2 elections.
What I did do, I say, this is the last one. Cameron talks me into but I actually proudly say I was one of the architects of business taxation because I think it's the reason we have a property tax system still. We survived what happened in California. But I was going to say one of the things he's emphasizing, property tax is the only tax is every state imposes. It's the only one. It's the oldest tax. Everybody says it's adequate. It's the only one that's common in every state. Now, when I say common, some states may do it different. I would argue California's on the outer fringes of what should be called a property tax, but every state has something called. And you debate how much of it is a local component and how much of it is mandates from the state. And Utah has a component of that of both. And of which the largest single levy is actually a mandated levy by the state. So it's one of the things that I don't know how you read that discussion, but you have that element of the state doesn't impose a property tax. The state just orders school districts to do certain things. And then the other is that in some ways become a self-fulfilling prophecy about property tax when people get upset about tax that they barely understand. But in truth, I don't know if we're any worse than anywhere else. In fact, I would argue every year, and Cam will always tell me, the legislators are saying this is the worst year they've ever seen it. And I tend to be somewhere on this. I don't know how many times I've heard that. But I think social media has changed the dimension of how fast you can spread hate about something. And I think that dimension has changed. But the truth of the matter is for all the screaming on, we basically have the same basic structure in place for 40 years.
I think it'd be good to bring out the 45% discount that we are, and potentially compare that to states that don't have that. Because we have this mentality from our residents that we are way overtaxed and how terrible this is, and our property taxes are so high, and yet every one of my clients that comes in from anywhere else says, "Oh my gosh, this is just amazing." And my property tax is how much? And it's a pretty big shock for them to realize it's that low.
Perfect, thank you. And then another thing I do want to note is one thing, to Roger's point about the news and social media. One thing we want to emphasize is when you see a percentage on a property tax increase by an entity, that doesn't mean your whole bill is by 20% or 10%, right? It's a segment of your bill. So that will be within that as well. Because it's an area where we see a lot of angst by residents.
And I'm looking at the comment from Mayor Bruno, and it looks like that's along the lines of what she's talking about in her comment there, where yes, people greatly misunderstand if we are doing a 10% at the city level, it's not 10% of the entire bill. So I'm looking forward to what they come up with. And
I applaud the effort.
Well, President, I'll add one other piece here. The primary audience here is the general public. It's to help supplement what you are already doing as you're communicating with the general public. But the secondary audience is legislators and trying to, in a user-friendly way, help them understand the property tax system as well. So if you have other thoughts of what else we should emphasize, let us know. We've contracted to do 10 videos. This was our first crack at what those topics are. we wanted to basically check in with the board today, the goal is to have these ready this budget cycle, so that you guys can use them if you're going to go through truth and taxation this year. So time is ticking to make sure we can get them done, right, Cassie?
Yes, and then another thing that's worth mentioning, we will be having some supplemental handouts as well, because I know we have some of our really, really small communities that probably don't use social media as their main way to distribute information. And one of those handouts, we're hoping to make it easy to compare with your property tax bill. So you can put this handout next to your property tax bill, and it'll help you read through your property tax bill. So we're hoping to have those ready by mid-year as well, so that they can be distributed.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and Mayor Bruno and Councilor Hinton for your comments and Mayor Burton, Kathy said this earlier, I just want to emphasize that we know a lot of your teams do great communications in this space. We gathered a lot of them as examples. But if there are individuals in your cities that you want to connect with us, please do so, and we can make sure we're all coordinated as much as possible.
That's everything we have for engagement.
Okay. In that case, if there's no other questions or comments, then we can move on to our advocacy report by Cameron and Jonathan.
Perfect. I mentioned that the board objectives that you as a board have adopted here, use the framing devices here, so those of you who are new. Each of our three divisions, engagement, advocacy, and operations, all have different board objectives that you've approved. So I'll let you talk through those three on engagement, and I'll turn it over here to Justin to reference the two objectives. And then, even though I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, today is to set the stage for the interim, we also want to take a moment today and take a look back. So go ahead, Justin.
So yeah, our objectives here, we talked about these, develop an policy platform of priorities that focus on collaborative outcomes and respect for the role of municipalities. That, say it otherwise, partnership, not preemption. And that really has resonated the last couple of years. And this year, it's one of the takeaways a little bit lower, but we really did see fewer bills ultimately targeted at cities. We tracked fewer bills this year than we tracked last year. And some of that, Mike and Alexa Bolt deserve a ton of credit because they read through all of the bills to see whether or not we should be tracking them and whether or not they matter. And so they were very good at kind of filtering things out. But there were ultimately also just fewer bills that impacted cities. We were not the target this year, and that's not a bad thing at all. And then maximizing political capital at the Capitol. This is such a real thing. We always talk about it amorphously, but there really is, you know, I don't know how to track it correctly. We sort of just sense it. But there's an amount of capital we have, an amount of asks we have, an amount of things we can really shoot at before, you know, they stop listening. And last year at the end of the session, we had no capital. Particularly in one of the bodies. We had nothing left in the Senate last year. This year, I would say we ended the session with capital left to spend. This year was good from that perspective. So one, if you didn't participate in the LPC wrap up, if you want to go back and watch that hour-and-a-half video, but it was fascinating to go through every single bill that we talked about in LPC, and we kind of gave the final disposition about what failed and what passed. So just quick quiz. Does anybody know percentage-wise how many bills that we tracked failed this year? Not that high. That would have been awesome. It was about 53%. So of everything that we tracked this year, more failed than passed. And I don't know that we've had that in the last few years. So that was also kind of fascinating. We had, and we want to talk about this, one of our suggestion questions, but we had record participation as far as what online and in-person LPC, just huge numbers of those participating online, as well as the room. We all know the room's already packed, but the number online was even more this year. And Cassie, I want to make sure I get this right. We had more individuals opening emails, even though our open rate was down slightly.
Yeah, so we had about, on average, 400 to 500 more opens a night compared to last year.
So okay, 400 more opens a night. So a lot of people get it. One of the interesting things we also found out during the session, we do those kind of LPC recap videos or midweek videos. that we try to do in 3 minutes or under, and we never quite hit. But we had a legislators from watching those videos. I had some legislators at the end of the session. A couple of them said, "Oh yeah, I watch your videos, during the week, so I know what's going on." And so that was fascinating that some legislators are watching our videos to get the update of what's going on with something. So that was fascinating. Affordability was a huge component of what was talked about this year, from childcare to energy to fuel taxes, obviously to property tax and everything else. Big component of what they talked about this year, and we knew that going into the session, and that really stayed true throughout the session. And then it's an election year, and it's always fascinating to see what bills pass or are presented during an election year and what goes down. And the important thing to remember is next year is not an election year. So I won't predict that all these trends are going to hold true next year that maybe held true this year. So what didn't happen? There was a lot of things that didn't pass, and water is one of the big ones. Do we have the clip from the governor's news conference on that one, or if not, that's all right. We're running slow. That's okay. The governor mentioned this last week in his monthly news conference when someone asked him, "What is the water year going to look like this year?" And he said, "Not great," is basically the takeaway. The soil is fairly saturated right now, which is good. It means water that does run off should go to the reservoirs. It won't seep into the ground because we've actually had a very wet last couple of months. But the snowpack is bad, which means water year is going to be a little bit rough. We had like one good year there, but we're going to be back to where we were a couple of years ago. And so the question was, are we going to have drought declarations? Are we going to have emergency declarations? Are we going to have things like that? And the answer is probably yes. At some point during the year, we will have some declarations, and that will mean potential mandatory cutbacks on certain things. So one of the things that we're planning on doing, well, let me back up. So what didn't happen was water. Like, very few water bills passed this last session. If you look at the water section in that wrap up, everything from 501, which is the fee increase, on down to some of the conservation, everything failed. Water stuff just failed all over the place. But it's something that we're going to need to talk about, particularly this year and looking forward. So we thought it was very successful in our last caucuses at our conference when we just talked about the state housing plan. We had Laura Hanson there talking about the state housing plan. Every caucus, we went through that and got really good feedback. We thought that was really a good way of handling caucuses. So our plan for the mid-year caucus is to have Brian Seed, Great Salt Lake Commissioner, and then the USU Institute of Land, Water, and Air come in.
The Lorax of
And the Lorax of the Lake. That's Brian's third one. We're planning to have them at each of the caucuses to talk through what water looks like coming forward, going forward this year, where we're really at as a state with water. When Brian came to our LPC, we had more questions for Brian than we had for the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, or Senator Curtis. People had a lot of questions for Brian. And so our plan for caucuses is to break up and talk about water. One of the things we're trying to figure out is exactly how we break those caucuses up, because Southern Utah, very different than Northern Utah. Great Salt Lake is very different than the Virgin River as far as the water needs and what's going on there. So caucuses may look a little bit different as far as how we break those up. Goldilocks Conference, I don't know who has just the right amount of water. I don't know who that caucus is, but there's definitely, I don't know if anyone has too much.
I don't know that anyone in the state has just the right.
Everyone says it's just a little too more than a little too. But so that is our plan for caucuses, is to bring Brian and his team. They've already committed to do this, and we're going to talk about water and be able to have some really both specific and very blunt conversations about what water looks like, and people be able to ask and answer questions there. So any questions about that one? That's going to be a thing we're going to need to talk about. Water is going to be a big deal this year. And it's going, yeah, Mayor, please.
The combination of additional pressure for growth and building more houses and the increasing lack of water, is that going to be combined?
That is one of the things Brian's, happy to talk about. Yeah, I've talked about that with him before.
We actually, the mayor last week, we went to a stage 2, which is volunteer for everybody, but 10% from all state governments in Salt Lake City. State, local, federal governments in Salt Lake City, 10% reduction in their water use, but volunteer everybody else. And that was Mayor Medic.
News release last week.
Just, I think you're probably already aware of this, that there's gonna be certain communities that are gonna wanna have conversations about reuse and aquifer recharge.
Yes.
And some of those are, there's definitely a Northern Utah County group, there's another Davis County group that have concerns in those areas.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a way to, if you're reimagining different groups, caucuses.
Well, and that's that's a good because we've been trying to figure this out. 'Cause one, we talked about doing by watershed, but you bring it up by subject. I think it would be wild to not do something where Southern Utah has its own thing because they're just such a different beast, especially with water. But yeah, having a reef use or aquifer or something like that. So if anyone has thoughts about that, just a different ways of breaking that up.
Break it up by congressional district.
By congressional district, whatever those are. I don't know if those are going to be in the
Let's use Slido and draw our own map.
Okay, I rescind my question.
You're still in the end of legislature, just.
Yeah. Going back to end of legislature, so we do want to get some feedback. So another thing that didn't happen, we didn't get the bill that we thought we might get on Amendment D. It's not Amendment D, but that's our short at this point. This is the bill that would be shoring up initiative and referendum power, the ability to make changes if something is passed by initiative, potentially referendum, depending on what they want to do. But by initiative, this is one where we saw a special session a year and a half ago where they passed what would ultimately become Amendment D, and then the court shot this down. So if you remember, we had a lot of discussions as both a board. We talked about this at our annual conference. We had a webinar on this, but we get put in a very interesting political spot when something is a ballot proposition because we cannot expend any public funds for a political purpose. A political purpose is anything that's on the ballot. So we had a lot of pressure from legislative leadership asking us to weigh in to take positions on Amendment D, and we will say, because of appeal, we can't do that. 2011-1203. We can't weigh in, we can't do that. We expect there to be pressure again when something comes out. It didn't come out during session. We expect it to come out at some point during a special session. President Adams has said specifically, this is something we expect to see. So this is one that didn't come up during session. We expect to come up during the interim. And when it does, we'll have to have some discussions around what that looks like politically, how we take a position, because we can take a position on a bill. We just can't take a position once it's a ballot proposition. So this is something we'll have to deal with. We've been kind of teasing this for the last year and a half. It'll probably come this interim though. So
And just one last thing to add to this, when Justin was saying we, he's referencing the league, but you as individual elected officials can take a position for or against a ballot proposition.
as long as you don't have to do it.
Yeah, that's right. So the league may say, here are the reasons for and against the ballot proposition, but we're not taking a position on it. We can take a position on a bill that facilitates it. And then once it goes on the ballot, then Mayor Palmer, as Lauren Palmer, as Mayor of Harriman, you personally can take a position, and you should expect those phone calls from legislators, Mark Shepard, Mayor of Clearfield, Kate Bradshaw, Mayor of Bountiful. You should expect those phone calls from legislators asking you to weigh in. So nothing to debate right now, but just situational awareness as we're setting the stage for the interim.
Yeah. And then we do want to get some feedback on a few questions here. And I know we've got Tyler coming in a few minutes. So, but before that, Carson, I know we've got some slides that we do want to share. I'll kick it to you, and then we'll get to these questions.
Thank you. And this will be Cassidy and I. And we wanted to just briefly, Justin mentioned some of the member engagement that we had through LPC through the session. We just wanted to kind of a high level demonstrate what that actually looks like, how we're trying to break down the data a little bit more granularly to be able to see how we can boost more LPC engagement and how we can better use the communication tools that we have to inform members and help them engage. So Cassidy, I'll turn it over to you for the first couple of these.
Yeah, we'll go really fast. So, open rate. We go one more, Carson.
Yeah.
Oh, just can't go back. I lied. 49%. This is like 3% lower than last year, except as Justin mentioned earlier, we have a lot more people opening our nightly emails. So we have really enjoying seeing those numbers stay stable. I was really nervous last year because we had a lot of double emails in our account as everyone was switching from .org, .com to .gov. And I've deleted a lot of those and we still have a great open rate. So thank you for opening our email. Our next slide will kind of show you how many people are opening individual numbers of emails. So we sent about 30 emails over legislative session. So we have a lot of people who may not be opening any, even though I give them an option to opt out every year. They don't. And then we have quite a big chunk of people opening every single email. You may be wondering, do LPC voting members open more emails than our general population? They do not. The trend is actually very similar. So LPC membership is actually really reflective of the rest of our membership in terms of like technical involvement within what we do, which I thought was really interesting. All right, Carson, you can keep going.
Do you think that LPC members might not open them because they were there for the updates in LPC?
I think they.
Possible. So one thing I noticed, and we're going to talk about this in a second, is Justin's recap video of LPC had a lot less views than last year, but this year I really worked hard to get LPC on our nightly email. So then people could go back to the actual LPC meeting to find something they may have missed or zoned out for, versus just hearing the recap from Justin. If Carson, go to the next slide. I also did this big long chart dividing it out by what open rates look like by city or town. So we have a collection of emails for each city or town. So for some of our cities and towns, that's just the elected officials. For others, it's like, I might have their water guy on there. I might have their events person on there, and just kind of like how many emails they're opening. So this is kind of the top range of the list. And if you look at the line, that's like the 50% of the data. And that means 50% are opening less than that line, or 50% of the number of we have are opening more. So we have all these different bars of kind of like the range, and obviously their sample size also kind of impacts that. Something I will note is we do have a collection of cities that have an lower midline, like their average is opening less than, in this case, 15 emails. So we're averaging about 10. However, as long as I see an outlier or the bar extends to the full 30, I'm not worried, right? So for example, in Taylorsville, I know John Hiskey is going to open every single email.
That's true.
He's told me that he does this. He opens every single email and then he copies sections that might affect other members of his staff and sends them that to get feedback. So if I'm seeing that in some of our smaller cities or towns, I feel pretty good about what our cities and towns are receiving. So something Molly and I will be doing is we're going to go through this list and kind of see cities or towns that may be struggling with participating with us during the legislative session and do some additional outreach there. And I know you all want to know where your cities are. We can talk about that.
Yes, I just trying to zoom in this.
I know. I made it small on purpose just so you can kind of get like an overview. And
now you made it small. Now I'm zooming in.
All right, Kirsty, you can move on to the next slide. We also saw an increase in our open rates in the Senate and the House when we send them emails saying, hey, vote yes or vote no on this bill, which I was actually very surprised by in the Senate because we haven't seen a lot of turnover in the Senate.
Yeah.
So back to Justin's point about our political capital. You kind of see that increased videos. We can go ahead and skip through this. This is kind of like our recap and stuff like that. We tend to get a lot of views on social media, but we also get a solid like 40 views on each video that we do, which typically is one of us testifying in committee or one of you guys testifying in committee. Our traffic was up a little bit. You'll see big jumps on Mondays. I think a lot of that is from LPC happening on Monday and Bill Tracker. Keep going, Carson. LPC. So we have a lot of stats on what's happening via Zoom during our LPCs. So what this chart is showing you is the duration of the meeting and how many people are on the meeting.
Sorry, did you do also by how long the meeting is supposed to last?
If you see, two, we kept on track. We actually like finished on time, and then everything after that.
Yeah.
You can see where we end the meeting, but you can see the slow drop off as people are like, "All right, I'm done." But I honestly thought the line would be sharper. So.
Yeah, and this is the part we thought we were going to lose more people. We thought the drop off would be harder when we're supposed to end, and it's not that hard.
The train wreck, you cannot look away.
Seth said FBC is a train wreck. Got it.
And obviously, like, we only have a measure of what we're all back on these questions. Thank you. So it's very interesting to see kind of like how this is trending online, especially when we're having more people attending online than we are in the room.
Looks like we have a question
yes.
from Mayor Bill Wright.
I was on mute. Sorry. I'm going back to that opening the rate. I did not see it, Payson City on there. Maybe I missed it, but I just was wondering why we were not on there if we're not.
So, Mayor, we have over, what, two hundred
It's just a sample.
forty-seven communities, so
Oh,
I would
just
just sample.
just a
So I do
sample.
have the number for you and I will send it to you after this meeting.
Okay, that's fine. I was just was checking.
Yeah, it's not comprehensive, just a sample.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
I tried to put it on a printout and it wouldn't even fit on a tablet size page, so. I wanted
You
to.
heard your inner Cassidy saying this is too much.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, this is too much.
She can't get after us if she does.
Standard stuff. Okay.
I think this is the point you're making, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is the point you're making. That's an incredible stick to it.
Yeah.
I think that speaks.
It didn't matter how long we went, people stuck with us.
Yeah, the quality of.
We should not take what we should have.
We should not take advantage of that. That is what I'm trying to tell you. And then our next slide kind of shows like how many people are repeat attendees. So if for the meetings they signed up, how many attended 6, and you'll see how the number of, okay, let me rephrase that and think of all my thoughts here. I wondered if you went to less meetings, if you spent less time in the meetings overall, right? So what this chart is showing you is how many people who were on Zoom attended all 6 and for what amount of time they were on there. So we kind of see a little bit more variation in that, and you'll see there's quite a few zeros at the bottom. I think that's our hybrid attendees. So some of you may sign up for the meeting just to get it on your calendar, and then you attend in person, right? So like I would count as one of those points at the 0-minute line because I don't sign in with my Zoom account, I sign in with Carson's. So we're kind of seeing like a lot of people, they commit and come to some portion of all 6 meetings. And then Christy, you can move to the next slide. This is where our online attendees live. And I think this is important because LPC online is not just for people who are outside of the shed of maybe what would be acceptable to come to the Capitol, right? It's everyone in every city. And then I think the next one, Carson, is you.
Yeah, and I'll be quick on this. We wanted to do a quick sort of follow-up survey that we launched last week, 2 weeks ago. And the purpose of that was to try to just get more just direct feedback from members who participated in LPC and just try to get their thoughts on sort of just LPC logistics. And we wanted to know how effective they felt the meetings were. So first we asked how many meetings do people attend, which means they attended. And of the respondents, almost all of them attended at least 5, and the majority of them attended 7. So really impressed by that. I know it's a lot of time to take out of everybody's week, but I think that shows how dedicated people were to participating. We wanted to know, because Cassidy has a lot of great analytics for how many people attend online. We wanted to get a sense of how many people attend in person or online. We haven't done any real robust analysis on this data yet, but kind of at face value, I do think it's interesting that most people were online or in person primarily. They didn't really, only a handful of people said that they kind of mixed it up and did either one. So I thought that was kind of interesting that people have a kind of a clear preference in how they want to participate.
Going back to that, I mean, 2/3 are primarily online, which is going to get to our third discussion question here in a second, but that's changing over the years.
Yeah. We want to know how often people reached out to legislators, and I think the good news is that most people were reaching out pretty regularly, at least 5 times. Only 2 people said that they responded every day. I'm guessing some of those are in this room. But most people were at least 5 times. Many people were every meeting. Only a handful of people said that they never reached out to their legislators. I want to break that out about between voting members and non-voting members, because we have a fair amount of people who participate in LPC and maybe their staff and they're not really maybe a senior level where they feel comfortable reaching out on behalf of the city, but they just wanted to be informed and involved. What I think is really interesting is that non-voting members, they're much more likely to reach out to legislators more frequently than non-voting members. So I think that that kind of speaks to the ownership that voting and participating in that way gives our LPC members. So,
Karthik, I just make so it's interesting. So LPC voting members or non-LPC members aren't necessarily opening emails at a greater rate, but the LPC members are reaching out to legislators at a greater rate, and that is interesting.
Yeah. And then we wanted to know whether people felt like the meetings were engaging, and we didn't have a lot of definition here. We just wanted to see what people's general sentiment was. And we know that the meetings were long. We know that there's a lot of information covered, and I think as staff, our eyes are kind of glazed over by the end. We're the ones presenting, but I think it's really positive that almost everybody said that they strongly support that the meetings during the session were engaging, and so we'll keep kind of digging into data a little bit more to try to explore that. But I think this is really a positive data point for us and shows that the time is worthwhile for members.
Carson, on that survey question, we had the ability to say disagree, right? Nobody did. Yeah. I want to make sure we didn't like fake that.
You have to be informed. And then the last one I want to mention is that we asked whether people felt more informed or less informed, because again, I know that like coming out of a 2-hour long intense meeting, sometimes you're just like overwhelmed. But I think, yeah, again, the strong majority of people, 99%, said that they felt more informed after, or better informed about what was happening at the Capitol after LPC meetings. So glad to see that. And again, people could have chosen to disagree, but nobody did. So again, we'll keep kind of diving into this data and trying to pick out some more trends, try to pick out some more recommendations going forward about ways to make LPC more meaningful, more actionable, and give members feel like they have a stronger voice in the process. But I think the kind of the initial results are really positive, and there's some realities of the session that we just can't really, like, there were just so many bills to talk about. There's not a lot we could do with the timelines, but I think overall we feel pretty good about the initial takeaways, and feel like obviously during the session was a success. So are there any quick questions about that before we jump into the discussion items?
Okay, perfect. So we've thrown a lot of stuff at you there, which is what we always do. But do want some discussion back, and I'm going to take these questions in reverse order based on what we just talked about. But a majority of our LPC attendees are attending online at this point. And this is true during the interim, I believe, as well as during the session. Are there things that we can do to make sure everyone is getting the best LPC experience regardless of attending? Is there anything we should be changing up for anyone that was online? Are there things that we could do differently? Given there are some parameters about how the cameras work in the room and different things that we don't have a ton of control over. But are there things that we could change up or emphasize differently, given the amount of people that are online?
I'd be curious to hear from some of our board members that are attending online. Especially those that kind of routinely attend online because they're a further drive away.
While you're waiting for other comment, I'll just say that one of the things that was really helpful was wherever the mics were placed, I was able to hear online, and that's usually a problem with online Zooms, especially if you have different people participating, or people were repeating the questions that may have been asked, so that those who were on Zoom could hear what the issue was.
I saw Councilmember Hinton.
Oh, kind of along the lines of what she just said. It's good to have those questions repeated online. In the room, we could see the screen with the chat, but sometimes that chat was going so fast we couldn't follow that conversation, I guess, in person. So I do appreciate that Cassidy and Carson would, help us fill in the blanks with those questions, but sometimes we wanted to see that text of those chats, and I don't know if there's a way to fix that.
That's a good question. And I know, because I know Carson and Cassidy, you guys watch that more closely. I think some of it, well, you guys tell me if I'm wrong. I think some of it is people, because it's in chat, they can pile on very quickly with comments, just like a ditto or an I or a. So I don't know that you necessarily want to see all of it, but I don't know if there's a way to filter some of that differently.
Yeah, I think we use the chat in a couple different ways. Number one, that's how online participants can take votes. Number two, I think we want people to be able to submit feedback, and there's so many comments, especially as we kind of get later in the session, that it's kind of hard for even us to parse through in the meeting. We have to go back and it's super helpful because there's a lot of information that we can go back and garner from the comments. There's usually several hundred. Yeah, I think, and maybe it's just encouraging people to, maybe try to cut down on some of the snarky comments that make up a fair amount of the comments overall. And maybe I think one thing that we've discussed is trying to figure out how to analyze things like voting. So there's like a specific approach for meeting feedback. There's a specific approach for like if we have some of the target information we were requesting on taxes, Alexa was the point person. Some of the other technical feedback on 284, Jared was the point person. So that might be another way we can kind of look at it is say, for specific feedback on these items, rather than just drop it in the chat, just shoot an email, we'll drop it in the link, and that way we can make sure it kind of rises to the top of the right boxes. But yeah, I'm open to other ideas there.
Is there a
Well,
way?
and maybe the
Go ahead, Councilman, I'll chime in after.
I was just gonna say maybe the fix for me in the room is to be logged in to see the chat. I just know specifically the last meeting I was interested in the comments online and I couldn't see them because they'd gone, just like you said, piled on so quickly. So maybe the fix is just to be logged in as well as in the room. But that kind of skews your numbers too.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things we've talked about is the last couple of sessions we haven't had to take a close vote. If anybody remember, we used to take more close votes, and we haven't had to the last couple of sessions. If we get into a true voting situation online, between inline on the room, that's something that we as staff have been trying to figure out. Like, do we just make everyone log into the same system and vote that way? So we're just on one platform.
The only way we can get an actual numerical count without having to count hands.
Yeah, and counting eyes in a chat gets funky. But Cassidy, we were almost there. We had a meeting.
So, I mean, that's kind of the importance of the LPC sign-in. So what I do is I have all of the voting members, and granted, one thing that has really improved this process is you as a board voting to say, hey, you can only change your voting members twice a year. That has been super helpful for us as staff members, because now I have a list of the voting members and I have a list of their emails. So when you sign into LPC, I get that through Qualtrics, and I've written a piece of code where I can strip out everyone who's a voting member and I have their email. So I know that they've signed in. And so if we had to do a vote, I know who I'm counting. But if you don't sign in, I may see you in the room, but I may not. So I think we're still trying to figure out what is the best way to make that process easy for our members and easy for us. And we just haven't quite gotten there. But we're in a much better spot than we were a few years ago, I think, if we were to have a close vote.
Yeah, and we would figure it out this year. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I do always love the chat. There's some really good raw feedback in there, but I can see how from like a voting or trying to convey information, it's difficult. I wonder if there's a way. I mean, the league's been so great about finding tools like Slido. If there's like a companion piece where, I don't know if it's Slack or something else where we can have the more serious ability to be like, all right, if you need information on property tax, then
we have a channel here or something.
And it's for Jared, and if it's this other issue and Alexa's capturing it, it's on this channel. So that people, especially the voter members or the key people who are giving the feedback there, so that you can use those. Tools. I mean, in the room you get to have that side conversation with the person sitting next to you or walk into the hallway to grab something from another city. And so I hate to take that away because the chat serves that kind of important connection piece for those that are joining remotely.
I think that's an interesting way to try to make that a little more meaningful to people that can see that online. Like they don't have to log into Zoom to be able to see that. Good idea.
I wondered that too sometimes where I know there's important feedback happening in the chat, but I'm in the room and
we are having, in some ways, we're having two slightly different meetings.
Yes, in some ways we are having two slightly different meetings.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's see. So Catherine mentioned, could you separate LPC voting members into a different Zoom breakout room if you take a vote?
That's intriguing.
Oh yeah, I don't know if we actually talked about that. That's good. That's an interesting thing to explore. I don't think we talked about that.
Separate chats. They can.
We can. Yeah.
The biggest challenge is just the names people use. Like, yeah, we'd be the ones that have to sort people. But if somebody joins, like maybe they just use their first initial instead of their full name, or like with slide of I'm just trying to report results in the back end. Is there, yeah, somebody one day joined their, yeah, we're coming in.
Or to Parker's point, it's their personal email instead of their city email.
Right.
Like that's like the biggest problem we tend to have with these numbers. It's like,
Mm.
did you use, like, I have a whole slew of information on Gmail accounts, and some of them are like people's cities accounts because they haven't moved over to .gov yet. But someone was like, "Oh, I just accidentally signed up with my personal account because that's what my iPhone filled in." Right?
Yeah. That was the email you had open. I do want to spend a little time. Anything else on LPC as far as structural things, procedural things, anything you'd like to see different? Food doesn't count.
Okay, I have thoughts on.
And then before you answer that, Tyler Clancy has just joined us online. Tyler, this is Cam. We're just a few minutes late. Are you okay if you hang on for maybe 7 more minutes so we can finish this
All good.
discussion? You're good? Okay.
All good. Don't worry.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir.
So let's talk about Tyler Clancy for a second. No.
I do think it really helps, if we can get way more into a mode where we, announce the person who's talking and, that definitely, I think, helps those that are online.
When I'm making a comment or when I'm
When you're talking, commenting.
or
All,
both.
So anyone that's on a mic, say this is who it is and where they're from.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I think people get used to hearing building staffs are like, yep, I recognize that's Justin. But there's others that they might be like, just random person.
That's a good point.
We just had like a good etiquette.
Mhm.
Got my phone, that's what you gotta do.
That'd be good. Yeah.
Maybe one more mic then, because sometimes, when the mic is going back and forth, it's kind of,
Right.
That long pause, it's doing. I'm just gonna speak loud, let the noise work.
Because waiting for the mic does
Mic
kill
with
the mic
more
sometimes.
Yeah, mic with more mics.
So we have 2 more questions, and I'm gonna put up both out there. And if you want to answer, we're just talking about LPC, but how do we do in the 2026 session from your perspective on priorities of political capital? I know I sort of already answered that one a little bit, but would love to hear other perspectives. And then, how do we do during the session on membership involvement in advocacy? So thoughts on either of those? Or any other thoughts on the session? How do we do?
Just a thought I want to share probably is more of the how did we do with membership involvement and advocacy. I feel like that as the session began, there was certainly a lot of curiosity about where bills were, and I think you as staff, I think we as an LPC operation did a really good job of week to week giving, let's call them breadcrumbs as a bills on property tax morphed, as bills on other topics morphed. I felt like our members, wherever they were online or in the room, I think they were able to see the progress and the evolution of those topics. And I really like that. I don't know that this year was a whole lot different than other years. Maybe the big difference this year, there wasn't quite the surprises at the end of the session that kind of hijacked maybe that last meeting.
That was a surprise.
But I really felt like that our members were able to follow along the evolution, and we did a really good job of bringing them along in some of the more heavy, weighty topics that we.
I appreciate that, Seth. One of the things, I know I've expressed this to many of you, one of the things that was interesting this year is that we didn't really have what I call like a big bad. Some years we'll have a couple bills and those are the big bills. That's like the final boss. And we talk about them every LPC and we're working through them. This year we had a lot of second tier kind of level things. And it gets really difficult to figure out how to prioritize. When it's the big bads, we know, like we need to talk about these 2 or 3 bills. When it's 20 bills that are sort of next level, it gets harder to kind of prioritize those. And you saw that on the LPC agenda. We would have so many bills on the agenda because once you're down at that next level, Jared's bill is no more important than the bill I'm working on. That's we're all kind of second level bills. And so, yeah, we were trying to figure out that all session is how to talk about all the different things that are going on that, frankly, in previous years, we may not have even had time to talk about because we were so focused on whatever the big thing was. So I appreciate that, son.
I think you guys did a really good job in committees. I think the committees in general did a really good job in filtering through these so that they either didn't come out of committee or they came out better. And I know I saw a lot of testimonies going on and a lot of people, participating in that. So I thought that was an accomplishment. From last, previous sessions.
Yeah, if I mean the legislature report card on committees, they did a better job this year. Their grade went up for sure.
I do have just a question, Tom. Looking at more of the executive group and how much pressure they were holding down, and if that is there more need for us to get more involved in how we get a little bit more, take some of that heat off of that executive and bring it down to just the board members here and say, hey, how can we help you with some of this stuff? And I know it's hard to pass on something, but maybe somehow reach out, or we need to reach out, somehow better communication, say, hey, where do you need our help in certain fields? Because we might have some expertise that could do that. And I know you probably lean on some of the stuff at Salt Lake City just because we have a.
We do talk to your folks a lot.
Yeah.
So, council member, that actually was one of the top priorities that when President Rush and I sat down last summer before she became president, that was one of her pieces that she wanted to accomplish this year was how can we better engage individual board members and basically fill that gap between the executive committee, which I should have let out with this in the beginning of the meeting. Like, I want to thank the executive committee for the amount of time that they put in on lots of different issues, lots of 7 a.m. phone calls, lots of late night messages back and forth, a tremendous amount of time and expertise. And then we have LPC. And LPC, I like to grab this one. It's on my desk upstairs. It's just a reminder to me of how far we've come. This is an LPC agenda from 2020, where I was hand counting on the back as we were counting the number of LPC votes. A lot of you weren't even in office yet. In 2020, this predates COVID, and we had 91 votes that we were counting. That was the people in the meeting. So to go from that, in a matter of a few years to now, we've got 400 people on the call, not all voting members. But you know, it is a phenomenal growth that we've experienced here. But I think there is still this space between being an executive board officer, an LPC member, and you as board members, and what's your role during the session. So one way we tried to do that this session is we tried to have other board members participate in the work groups the ad hoc work groups that happened during the session. We always made sure we had at least a couple of board members, not just executive board members in those calls. And then we tried to have other board members on call for committee testimony, but I think there's still room to improve.
And I always was impressed because every time I would talk to our rep, Angela was like, oh yeah, I've already talked with Cam, I've already talked to Justin, I've already talked, okay, great. So I appreciate all that. I just want to make sure that we're helping you out as best as we can.
I like that idea. I think there's something to say for in advance of the session coming up with, okay, these 2 board members are on water. You can always hit them, they'll come to the Capitol on water. These 2 are on housing, these 2 are on transportation, these 2 are on. And that way, you just have them in rotation that you can text them and say, hey, we have an important meeting to come up. We need more bodies on this or expertise, whatever. But maybe if we pre-fill that, I'm not suggesting we have 8,000 subcommittees, but if we have everybody has their, I am the water liaison, maybe that would help. So you don't have to do it in the middle of the session.
I think knowing to in advance who has time and capacity to come up. There's definitely times where you can do an online testimony, but I think the session is particularly for committee testimony more impactful when you're in the room. And I really appreciated the executive committee does put in a ton of time, and we sign up for the bonus pack of time for these positions. So I really appreciated. It also happens to fall during my busy season, but it luckily dovetails. So I was really grateful that, Troy was often available to testify and Lauren was able to testify. Appreciated Krista was able to fly up and she testified remotely several times. And then there's others that had some flexibility to be up. Tammy Tran was up quite a bit. Dirk Burton was up. I think the hard part is the way every 24 hours, we never know what the schedule is going to be in the Capitol based on when they're releasing committee agendas. So if there's certain topics that board members are interested in and able to help fill in because they've been part of a work group or it's really important to their city, and then that they've kind of built some flexibility and bandwidth into their life for that 7-week time period where we can call on you to come up, and we know that in advance, that would probably be how we bridge that gap between the executive committee that's up there quite a bit, and then the board and having you all help. Because that's kind of what we need to know is, it's one thing if I'm like, hey, Jessica, sorry to blow up your day. Can you drop everything you're doing and be to the Capitol in an hour? For you, yes. And I actually thought that if I did that, you'd probably do that. But if I did like, hey, Jessica has been on the water work group, she's up to speed. So if we do give her that 24-hour notice, she's built in that flexibility. I think that changes the dynamic for how the staff and the executive committee can hold people.
Well, I think, and the other piece of it, what I'm thinking, I really like that is if we had a couple of people assigned to subjects, because sometimes we just need a gut check on something really quick. And if someone has, an expertise or a subject matter, and I can say, I know Mayor Shepherd has this, I know, whatever, I can call him up and say like, okay, board member, I need somebody to give me a gut check on this. And we do this all the time. And luckily, like I said, Kate's down there, so we can grab her and say, President, gut check, quick. But going forward, we won't have that the same way. So yeah, having some people that are assigned to different topics that we could gut check with. Even if you're not getting up there to say, hey, this bill just dropped, give your quick take on it.
Is there a way to get a hold of people quicker too? Because I would get emails, but we all do, right? We get so many emails that would say, hey, I need to know before the end of the day or before, and by the time I saw it had already almost passed. And so, and I know text messaging is really hard, but if we I don't know, group me with different groups or something like that.
Well, if we knew what people were assigned, we could figure out a system.
Because if it's in my face, I see it, but if it's in my email, I might not for a while.
Yeah.
And I know no one has time to make calls, try to get hold of everybody, so.
Oh, we call text a lot, but
yeah, I would say text is really helpful in Capitol because you could, Justin can be in a committee hearing and text. It's hard for him to be in the committee hearing and not get in trouble.
Right,
from calling you.
Right, yes. So text is great. I'm just saying if there's one platform or I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea of kind of assigning some stuff up in advance, and then, like I say, like if it's water, let's pick up. If it's water, it's going to be me as the staff are dealing with it, and if it's wooey, Jared's going to be stuck with it. Whatever it is, forever. But yeah, if we knew, like I've got 3 of you on a text chain, and this is what it's going to be, then yeah, I really like that. That's great feedback.
Sorry to cut off this awesome discussion. We don't want to leave Clancy hanging.
You know what?
Too long.
We like to leave homelessness last with little
He's no longer homeless. He has a phone. So,
well, Tyler, thank you very much for joining us. I keep getting tongue tied because I want to call you Representative Clancy, but those days are over, right?
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah.
So we'd asked Tyler to come join us at the board meeting. He's been officially on the job now for 2 weeks as of today. And we, even though our schedule is running late, we're still going to spend the full 25 minutes. But Tyler will just shorten the last agenda item to make sure we get the full time that he committed with us. So thank you for making time to join us. And Molly, I'm going to actually give you a moment just to refresh everybody's memory of where we're at, and then we'll have you turn it over to Tyler. Does that work?
Yeah, it's great. And I'll try not to do too much because I want to make sure that we give space for Tyler to talk about what he wants to talk about. So after Wayne Niederhaus announced that he was leaving Niederhauser last winter, Nick Coleman stepped in as interim, and then Tyler was named as the new incoming chair. We are part of the coordinator for homelessness within the state. We're really excited to have him and work with him. This session, I think, showed us that we were in a bit of a transition period. There's still a lot of uncertainty about a campus coming online and what that might look like. One thing that we're looking at right now is the end of the winter response funding and policy, which means that there are hundreds of beds that pending full funding and land use permissions may go offline, which may then lead to hundreds of people being unsheltered in our city streets across the state. So we've had conversations about that. Tyler, I'd love it if you could kind of chat through the legislative session and what you're thinking ahead. And then we did briefly chat about our desire to still create a mitigation task force of our shelter cities and non-shelter cities ahead of next session, even though that's a statute. I still think it's we as a league would love to do, just anyway, and come up with some legislative recommendations. So we're really excited to have Tyler in this space. We're gonna miss him on the Hill, but I think he's very well suited to be in this position and move us through this next chapter of policy.
Well, thanks so much, Molly. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, as Molly mentioned, stepping into a pretty easy job right now, and no big crises or anything coming our way. Well, I'll do this really quick. I'll share just briefly about the legislative session, talk about the appropriations and policy. I'll share briefly about the winter response opportunities and challenges. And then more than anything, I want to be here to answer any questions as well. I think that's probably how I could be the best asset going forward. I'll also make a note that I'll share my email, my new email address, and I'll share my cell phone number on the chat here. So if there's any mayors or other municipal leaders who need any help, need any assistance, or just would like to connect generally about opportunities or challenges that your city's facing, we will absolutely make that a priority. So I'll just first echo the sentiment that was shared that the league is absolutely very, very visible and very engaged on the Hill on a number of issues. But in my portfolio, they were absolutely available and engaged at every step of the way on homelessness. So there's a couple of policy items that moved forward and some that didn't on homelessness. There's some bills that moved forward that gave cities more tools to address what would generally be called disorder. So identifying areas for stay out of drug areas. There was legislation that passed to restructure the Office of Homeless Services, make it more streamlined and effective so we can be better partners to serve cities and counties. I'm actually in Mayor Wood's conference room right now in South Salt Lake. That's why I couldn't join you in person today. We just finished up a meeting. And then probably the most comprehensive homelessness legislation was run by Representative Steve Eilson from Sandy. That bill actually failed on the House floor by a very close margin. And there were some policy items in there that Molly and you all as the league had worked very closely on. Because of the league's leadership, we're actually able to revive key components of that legislation and move it into other legislation that was able to pass. Those key components were allowing for flexible permitting for shelter beds for cities that consented to that and wanted that flexibility. It enhanced mitigation funding for West Valley City, who's been a great partner in this effort and in this work to serve our unsheltered community. And then those were the main components. I'll parlay that into one element that failed in Representative Eilson's bill was the statutory framework that established a task force for the league and the Office of Homeless Services and the Homeless Services Board to work together to provide clarity for cities moving forward on mitigation funding. That's something that Mayor Bradshaw and I have committed a partnership that even though it didn't pass in legislation, but we are absolutely going to lead out on this. And so I've already dropped a line to Molly and her team to say, hey, who needs to be at the table? Who would like to be a part of this task force? We want to engage shelter cities and non-shelter cities alike. And hopefully the end goal would be to recommend legislative changes that would give clarity and consistency to the mitigation process. I'll finalize by sharing on the funding front. The governor's budget request for homelessness was fully funded for the first time probably ever. The total number is about $45 million, and it's partitioned out between one-time money and ongoing money, and it's partitioned out into 3 tranches. The first is high utilizers in the criminal justice system. The second is emergency shelter and housing, and the third is mental and behavioral health capacity. And these funding is contingent on a 1-to-1 local match. We're going to be doing a full scope review of how much money is already being spent in the system, where that's being spent, and where we can be great partners to you as leaders on the front lines, on the municipal, and then also on our partners on the county front as well. So I hope that gives a general overview. I'm more than happy to send a legislative summary to Cam if that would be helpful to disseminate that to members. But I want to make sure that I use your time effectively and help answer any questions that may be important on the heels of the session.
Mayor Palmer has a question for you.
Tyler, can you go into the mitigation funding, the one-to-one local match, and then the aspects of that?
Absolutely. So it's actually two different things. So the mitigation funding was relatively unchanged. The only thing that changed with mitigation funding was in FY 2027, there were a one-time 15% increase to the mitigation funding because that clarity and that consistency hasn't been established. That was through Representative Elison's bill that died, but then was kind of revived and put into pieces. There's a funding stream that was identified, and there's one-time funding and ongoing funding for both, is high utilizers in the criminal justice system. So just to give an example of what that means, and I'm using some big numbers here, so bear with me, but there was 1,000 individuals in Salt Lake City alone. So for example, Mayor Palmer, these individuals could probably be getting arrested in your city or in Midvale or in South Salt Lake. But for the data set, we're only looking at arrest data from Salt Lake City. These 1,000 individuals comprised 43% of all arrests in the entire city in 2025. So if you break that down to man hours, it's about 20 full-time employees dealing with this relatively small group of individuals who are cycling over and over and over in the criminal justice system. When you cross-reference that with homelessness data, these individuals are disproportionately seen in homelessness. And so really what we're recognizing is that homelessness is a complex issue. It comprises that individual who's, someone that's my age, who's out and about living in dealing with addiction, and maybe I'm committing theft and other types of disordered behavior to provide for that addiction. But it's also the mom fleeing domestic violence with her children. It's also an individual who was released from state hospital, who's still experiencing mental illness, and they have no place to go. And so what the legislature did by appropriating that funding into high utilizers in the criminal justice system is they're saying, we want to support homelessness, but we want to see you be innovative with this population in particular. So we know they're headed on a path of either long-term incarceration or death. This is the number one age range for overdose deaths in the state of Utah right now. And so what can we do to be more effective in our interventions and help people heal? So Mayor, to just recap on your question, mitigation, there was a 15% one-time adjustment that goes into effect in FY 2027. And then the high utilizer money is a separate piece completely. I tend to believe that it could be used to enhance mitigation funding, but that's to be seen. So that's a separate set of money.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Dirk Burton, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
I do. We met right before the session started, and you were asking me what I thought needed to be done to help with this. And I think that comment ties into what you started out with your conversation, how the state needs to bring their resources together and have an organized plan and not just leave it up with the local communities. I mean, right now, wherever the shelters are, whether it's Ogden, Midvale, Salt Lake City, it feels like it's left all to them to do all the work. I think it should be under the state to do the work, and those just happen to be houses where the homeless go in to receive their help and resources. I think getting the state together and putting all the resources together, all the providers together, and have them come up with their real plan is going to be helping a lot. So I'm very strong behind that.
Well, thank you, Mayor Burton, and I'm with you 100%. I think it was a key moment because, as you know, Mayor, and I've heard you say this in different iterations, but you can talk about your priorities, but it's your budget that really shows your values. And I think the state investing a historic amount in homelessness, I think you can expect that the state is really going to engage deeply. To your point, Mayor, that we can't just say this is a Salt Lake City problem or this is a West Valley City, whatever the city is. We've got to be united. We've got to have a strategic plan. We've got to hold ourselves accountable as state leaders. So as Molly mentioned, I'm relatively new to this role, still kind of finding my desk and getting my computer set up, but I'm ready to roll and ready to collaborate and work together. And I hope that you, for those of you who we've worked together, you know that I'm absolutely committed to being a collaborator, being a partner, and supporting the good work that you're already doing. So thank you for teeing that up, Mayor Burton.
And I want to thank you. I feel like we had some really great conversations, particularly the last 2 nights of the session, especially when we were all directing the intern Witchfield to put the language in. Intern put it in 2 bills.
Too soon.
Yeah.
It was such a moment when we were all in the hallway figuring that out, and then
It was a moment.
with very clear instructions that did not get followed, but at least we passed it twice.
Complete with the hands in the circle.
Yeah, we did. We all put hands in.
That was something.
Was something. So anyway, thank you for helping us figure all that out. But we had some great discussions about even though the work group wasn't going to go into the bill, the importance of that work group. And so I know that you're only 2 weeks into this very light and easy assignment, but have you thought about, your timing, how you'd like us to send you any recommendations, going forward about that particular component?
Absolutely. And yes, I basically lived in the hallway with Cam, Mayor Bradshaw, and Molly for the last 48 hours of the session. It was quite a time. Well, this is such a high priority item. So we've already actually created a kind of a placeholder spreadsheet for the membership of who we're ready when you're ready. You can submit those directly to me or Nick. This is an extremely important item, and for that reason, we're ready to rock. So whenever you identify those leaders who you'd like to join the task force, we'll get rolling, and our staff is aware that this is a key priority for the stability in our system, to give the leaders on the front line like yourselves the clarity and consistency. That was the big word, consistency. I was just with Mayor Wood, and she just said, "Listen, we need the mitigation funding. It's super helpful, but right now it changes every year, and our heads are spinning. So we're ready. It's on our hot sheet, and looking forward to working together, Mayor Bradshaw."
Thank you. I think from our perspective, we'll be looking to get some recommendations and then formally adopt those in our April board meeting. And so if that won't slow down your timeline too much, we'll plan to get you our suggested recommendations representing shelter and non-shelter cities after that April meeting. Unless, of course, you're planning to come to St. George, then we'll just tell you there.
Is that on the 23rd?
Yes, sir. 23rd and 24th.
23rd and 24th. Okay. I think someone texted me today and they asked if I could come. So I'll make it. This is you all. I hope you know, I really want to be a partner in this and work together. And I want you to be able to pick up the phone and if you have a question for the state about homelessness, I want to be that partner and bring those resources to bear. So if I'm not there in person, I'll try to make that in person. St. George in April, it's just brutal. It's tough, tough. But no, I'll definitely try to be there. But if not, my goal, Mayor, is if we could get those legislative recommendations identified by around September or October, I think that sets us up for success for the legislative session, that we can get it down the pipeline, start to work the body a little bit, and hopefully be successful there.
Thank you. I think I speak probably for everyone. We're excited to have you in this role. We've long felt really good about the work we've done with you at the state capitol. So we would be happy to have you join us in St. George. If you found your way down there with a mountain bike, that would be great. We can have some offline discussions. And I see Mayor Nadolski has his hand up with a question. Okay.
I actually think part of my contract to speak today was I wouldn't take questions from Mayor Nadolski. Is that okay?
Tyler knows how I like to talk, so he's trying to bait me here. But I wanted to tell, for the benefit of the group, I had a really good meeting with Tyler and his team. It felt like a completely new energy. We left feeling really energized and excited. Tyler touched on these high utilizer population, and we kind of moved quickly past it. And I just wanted to reinforce something. When he talks about homelessness, he continues to talk about the entire spectrum of need, because he talked about how complicated the issue is, right? This issue of criminal justice and the justice system and the role that it plays is a leg of it, and it has been de-emphasized for too long. And this high utilizer issue is absolutely killing us. We have got to address it the way that he is going after it. And it does not mean, however, that we're, quote, arresting our way out of homelessness. I get so frustrated that legitimate needs that you can document with data, quantify, improve, that are being ignored, and that people are continually being harmed every day by the same small group of people, do not move towards solutions because of the politicization and this all or nothing mentality of the talking points. This is not what that's not what he's proposing. There's still all of the different pillars for homelessness, but this one is one that me and up here in Ogden that we're excited to be talking about. And really, Tyler, really appreciate the fact that you're willing to take that on.
Thanks, Mayor. And just building on the good work that's already being done, trying to row in the same direction, and recognize that it's never going to be a one-size-fits-all solution to a very complex challenge. So thanks, Mayor, for your confidence, and hope to continue to earn it through our hard work together.
Thanks. And I'll just point out again that it really says something when Ogden and Salt Lake City come to the same, we're doing the same data analysis that Salt Lake City did. And there's nothing partisan about it when you have Salt Lake and Ogden on the same page. It literally is data, it's fact, and it's humanity, it's people. I just hope that the league will help make sure that this doesn't get pinned into the corner of arresting your way out of homelessness. But we do need to sometimes arrest people.
And since you and Salt Lake are so simpatico at this moment, we'll go to Councilmember Dan Dugan for the next comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mayor. I appreciate that, and I agree with you on that point. And I'm gonna shift Tyler to the other side of that spectrum. And first of all, shout out to Nick on his work over the last 6 months or so. I've had a number of interactions with Nick and your staff, and it's been wonderful. On the other side of the house is I'm looking at trying to remove some of the people that are in the system and how we can help them out that are probably on the higher, less needs side of the house, and that's the micro shelters. And I've had a lot of interactions with Nick on the micro shelters, have a lot of encouragement and also a lot of interest in putting micro shelters in other places of Utah. And I really want to continue on that effort. That's taking the ones that don't need as much help, but if they just have one small space, then they can get out of the system and quickly move on and provide more time and effort for others that need the help to get that help. So I really love to pick your brains more and work with Nick on promoting those micro shelters and how we can spread those around the state.
You said it perfectly, and I I'll call you councilman, but I always want to call you coach because I was a lacrosse player too at BYU. But so what Councilman Dugan outlined, and if you're interested in coming to see it, let me know or let any of my staff know, and we'll touch base with Councilman Dugan's staff. The micro shelters are a great example of success. There's a spectrum of individuals who are staying at the micro shelters. Some it is kind of their point where they entered the system, and for others who, as Councilman Dugan said, they're kind of on the other side of that spectrum where they're income, but they're being priced out of the market. There's actually, as we're bringing these new units online, we're going to be able to have some individuals stay there for longer because they want to. Yeah, that's the safe environment that they bring. These are essentially very small modular homes, and it's a very low impact to the community. This project that Councilman Dugan has championed is under the freeway on the west side of downtown, and you would never know it. All of you have probably driven past it 100 times, and it's very low impact to the community. It's managed very well. That one is managed by SwitchPoint. And Councilman, to your point about where we're headed on this, I actually got one of my first messages in the office is Iron County is looking to replicate the project that you've championed in Salt Lake City. So we do think that this is a replicable model. It fits a key need for many in the population, and we can do it very cost effectively and with a significantly lower impact to the community than, say, a low barrier homeless shelter or something like that. So we presented that to the Executive Appropriations Committee along with the Workforce Services Appropriations Committee, and that was reflected in our appropriations that were allotted to us for Pillar 2. A large part of that was for the expansion of these innovative projects. So thank you for bringing it forward, and we're certainly tracking that closely.
Thank you very much.
Question?
We got one more question.
Tyler, I don't want to put you on the spot, but could you let us know kind of what things are looking like in that April to July timeframe right now of funding coming online on July 1, but winter response kind of beginning to ramp in on April?
Certainly. So what Molly's referencing is over the past couple of years, there was some legislation that passed that allowed homeless shelters to go above and beyond their permits for occupancy because of the need for the extreme cold in the winter. And it was called winter response. And then beyond that, there was a code blue that I know you all are very familiar with. Well, there was funding that was appropriated by the Office of Homeless Services to help provide these costs for winter response. That funding was funded with one-time money, and so it was never ongoing funding for winter response. And also what happened is that winter response then turned into spring, summer, fall, and then winter again. So it was essentially held pretty consistent over the past couple of years. Well, as Molly mentioned, all of that funding is coming to a close on April 30th. And there's 687 beds that are currently propped up by that one-time funding that's set to expire. So we have new legislative appropriations that come in on July 1st. And so the question is, how do we navigate this? There's a couple of different questions at play, and I don't want to bore you with the details, but we're really looking hard at the cost effectiveness of every dollar that we're spending. The short of it is we want to invest in long-term solutions. We want to invest in the life-saving shelter. But at the same time, the number that it's at, which is about $1 million extra per month, is not quite sustainable. So what we're working on in our office is we're trying to find some funding to bridge us from April 30th to July 1st. We're still shaking all the couch cushions and trying to find every dollar and cent that we can for this situation. And we're also going to be deploying essentially mobile case management. So at the West Valley Overflow Shelter, West Valley, I just want to shout, I don't know if West Valley's in the room. I just want to give them a big shout out. They have stepped up in a huge way. West Valley has been a real blessing to the system by standing up a shelter and serving about 200 people every single day. So just take West Valley Overflow Shelter, for example, because they are building the plane in the air, if you will, they don't have case management. So clients that go there, it truly is emergency shelter. And the goal in Utah's explicit goal of homelessness is to move people on from homelessness. So we're going to try and bridge with the funding, but then we're also going to try and bridge with case management to do a full scope review of all of the beds that are currently online in the system, where they exist. And then we also want to help people exit and go into those beds. So if it's a drug treatment bed, if it's a housing voucher, if it's mental health, if it's a rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing bed, we want to make sure that we're utilizing all of those spots and doing that, essentially taking case management on the road and helping people find these exits. So that's what we're looking at. We are presenting kind of the initial piece of the puzzle tomorrow at the Homeless Services Board meeting. I'm going to share a little bit more in depth about what we're seeking to do, but it's an all hands on deck effort. So we're seeing what money the state can bring to bear, and then if cities or counties or philanthropic partners are inclined to support this effort as well, we would welcome that, as we're really trying to avert what Molly described as going from 687 to 0 and what that would do for our system as a whole. So it's a tough challenge. It wasn't what I wanted to hear the first 48 hours I walked into the office, a new crisis to deal with. But we can't look back. We can only look forward. And so this is an opportunity. We've been working with our cities, our service providers, and I'll tell you what, Mayor Bradshaw kind of nailed it earlier as I was listening to your meeting. There is a big overlap of people who are committed, who want to help, and we're gonna build that teamwork. That's kind of the status update right now, Molly. And hopefully, as we continue on, we'll be able to fill in more detail as we go.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much. And we really look forward to partnering with you and in this new role. And we'll work to be as supportive as we can be and make sure we give you good feedback and good people to be part of your work group. So we'll plan to hopefully see you in St. George in April. If you decide you can't make it down, we'll forgive you, but you're definitely invited if you make it down.
Well, thank you, Mayor Bradshaw, and thank you to the whole team and to all our great city leaders that are here today. It's always been a pleasure working with you on Capitol Hill, and hope to continue building those partnerships. So I'm going to text Molly. I'll text Molly my new email address, and make sure you have my cell phone. Feel free to disseminate that however is appropriate. So, but seriously, thanks again, and excited to keep the momentum rolling.
So much.
Sure. Thanks, Tyler. We'll be in touch. Thanks for the time today. Now we're at 2 o'clock, and we just saw that data about league members stick with meetings even if they.
That was not the takeaway. Remember?
I will be done by 2 o'clock. Right, but that's for 3 more minutes.
You know, the camera right outside, I was like, look at your agenda. And he's like, I can do this in 3 minutes.
Starting now. So thank you. Thanks to the league team. Most of the preparation for today's meeting, as you saw, came from other league members while I've been out. Thank you very much for the excellent discussion and presentation today. Just to wrap the legislative piece, I want to mention 2 quick conversations I had with 2 legislators this session. And one legislator told me in the morning that he was going to vote for a bill that the league opposed. Then that afternoon in committee, he voted against it. When I asked him why, he said, my mayor called me, and I can't say no to my mayor.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm going to share that from the stage at mid-year, but I'm not going to share his identity because I told him I wanted, but I think that's a very powerful example of the collective strength of the league. Second, the legislator standing next to him overheard that and turned to me and said, "Yeah, you guys do a better job of anybody at mobilizing your people." And I said, "Well, thank you." And that was a freshman, so this was his second year, so he doesn't have all the institutional knowledge, just what he's seen the last 2 years, and was really impressed with how we mobilize our members. So when we meet in April, you'll see the reference here to the board objectives. And for those of you who are new to the board, in the April meeting, that's when we have everybody in person prior to midyear, the day before the midyear conference. We break the board up into small work groups for small periods of time and do deep dives on different topics. So we'll for sure do that to talk strategically about local administrative advisor. And there'll be other topics we'll hit as well. We saw some of them are listed here on the agenda because we're still working through where we need your direction, and those small groups really bring out some really great discussion. So just be prepared for that for those of you who are new. That also helps inform the budget process. You approve the dues in January. That makes up more than 60% of our revenue every year. The rest of it comes from primarily from sponsorships and then from other event-related fees. And then when you set the budget tentatively in May and final budget in June, it's really personnel, events, and then policy and communication priorities, some of which we talked about today with making sense of dollars and the property tax outreach. So we'll be building that out based on your feedback as we bring the budget back to you. If there are other thoughts about LPC, let Justin know. We had a really robust discussion today, but if there are other thoughts, please let him know, and we may revisit that in April. We've also been trying to focus on our newly elected mayors and council members around the state. So I mentioned this at the January meeting that Councilmember Hinton hosted a meeting along with Mayor Bruno in southwestern Utah with a bunch of newly electeds. Councilmember Tolley in Park City hosted an event for newly electeds. Then to MAG, where over half of the mayors in MAG are new. Molly's going to be in the Uinta Basin on April 1st for their event because every mayor in the Uinta Basin is new. Oh, Molly's will be. Someone who's going to be there.
Jared will be.
Jared, sorry. I was out. Jared McKenna will be there. Then I'm doing an event in Monticello on April 13th because every mayor in San Juan County is new. Most of their council members will do that event. We're also going to be at the R6 event in May, and we're in conversations with CERTA to do an event later this year. And then we also have conferences in the next few weeks with the city managers, city attorneys, the treasurers, government finance officers, planners, and others as we're trying to do our spring training, and our spring training webinars kick off this week. So we are, even though the session just ended, we are out and about, and it's again, I really appreciate the flexibility of the family leave and want to thank our team for stepping up and doing some phenomenal work over the last couple of weeks, and then the next couple of weeks to go. If you have other thoughts about potential discussion topics in April, please let us know. And if you have other thoughts about the session, please let us know. We've sent out the dues letters, so those will be coming in, which will be posted on that front. But otherwise, it's been a terrific meeting, and we appreciate the time. President Bradshaw, I'll turn it back to you.
That was really impressive. I should have started the timer. I didn't.
He's pretty much there, yeah. I'll give it to him, yeah.
3 minutes and 54 seconds.
Oh, wow, Jared, of course. That's why nobody likes lawyers.
I enjoy spending time with this group.
So we're still a little punchy after session.
I have missed you, you guys, daily for hours on it. Okay, so we reached the end of our agenda unless there's any other business. Yeah. If not, then I look forward to seeing you all in St. George. Krista, I hope you have arranged for the weather to be nice but not too hot, since we're already experiencing what we expect from April in St. George on the Wasatch Front. So
We're in process.
Please hold it in the 70s to 85, 80
At midnight, like what time?
I want the daytime temperature no greater than 75 degrees for our summer.
Yeah.
With an evening rainstorm like last year.
That's right. Yes. It was a cool lightning storm.
But not until after we finish bike ride.
After the bike ride.
Say before everyone exits, bravo to our league staff and all of you that were up on the hill spending so much time. Thank you on behalf of all of us out in the hinterland.
Thank you. Yes, our staff did an amazing job. So round of applause for them. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, and please supplement that with the directive that Cameron go home and finish his leave with the kiddos.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, a second, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the discussion.